Hello and welcome to Just Right. This week's challenge is to write a short story to be published in Young Writer magazine. It's one of the best places for a talented young author to get noticed. Now, let's see, maybe it could be a gangster story. Now, or how about science fiction? No. Or maybe a horror story. Yes, definitely a horror story. Anyway, let's meet our Just Right challenger. Jessica is 12 and lives in Chelmsford. Jessica, don't go writing about me, whatever you do. But you want to take up the challenge?
Yeah, I really like creative writing, but it sounds a bit different from my normal school homework, so I think I'm going to need a bit of help from an author.
Well, you're in luck there, Jessica. Phil Lovesey lives in Chelmsford too, and he's written loads of short stories, as well as full-length horror novels. Phil, are you up to giving Jessica a hand?
Oh, definitely, and as soon as possible. The deadline for submissions to Young Writer magazine is next week.
Let's get cracking. Phil has set a story in the lobby or atrium of the council building in Chelmsford.
But what's an atrium?
What's an atrium? Good question, but I suppose that's best answered by actually the building itself. Let's go inside and have a look, yeah? So, this is it, the atrium. What do you think?
I thought you were a horror writer. It's not very scary, is it?
Well, that's true, but sometimes you don't have to set horror stories in a really horrible place. You're not convinced, are you? Tell you what, come with me and we'll pop upstairs, I'll read you my story. OK, Jessica, well, this is my story. It's called Atrium. Welcome to my house. Not that I chose it, nor that it keeps me here. Quite a place, you'll probably agree. Quite a pleasant place. Bright, airy, unthreatening. Hardly the type of place you'd expect to find real horror. And who is this in such a hurry this morning? His name is Felter, John Felter, Managing Director. The man who once told me I should put more of myself into my work. He commissioned me to create this beautiful structure. I was the architect, I was responsible, but now he takes credit for it. Again and again he rejected my plans. I worked too many late nights under too much pressure. And finally, with the deadline looming, I couldn't take it any longer. I threw myself down the elevator shaft. Going down, Mr. Felter? They'll say it was a heart attack, but Felter knows the truth. This building was my life and my death. And whatever he thought, I always put a lot of myself into my work. Oh yes, Felter, you're going down, down to hell.
I can see what Phil means now. His story was all the more chilling for being set in such a harmless-looking place. Spooky old houses and ruined castles are great, but if you want to be a bit more original, experiment with surprising settings for your story. It's what you do with the setting that'll make your story scary. Now it's Jessica's turn.
Phil, this is a place where I'd like to set my story.
Jessica, I think it's a fantastic place. Let's go, let's see what we can do with it, yeah? Why did you choose it?
Well, I come here loads and loads and I just love skating and I just thought there'd be something in this place.
I think there's a lot in this place. I mean, for one, when I look at these people skating around, that seems really strange.
Yeah, but it's a lot better when you get to do it yourself.
Oh, I tell you, I'm not very good at actually skating myself, but I suppose what you're talking about is like a difference in perspective, a difference in point of view. And that's a bit like writing in a way. I mean, you can have a first-person perspective or a third-person perspective.
Well, what's that?
OK, I'll tell you what, Jessica. Let's do a little third-person experiment. Let's pretend I'm writing about you right now, lacing up your skates and getting ready to go on the ice. And I'd say something like, Jessica firmly tied up her laces, wrapping them tightly round her ankle, making the skate almost a second skin. And then she stood, and she made her way to the ice.
No one would have had the slightest clue that they were seeing history in the making. And when she stepped out, who could possibly have known they were sharing the rink with a future world champion? Okay, Jessica, let's try the same thing again, but this time from the first person perspective, which means I want you to tell me what's going on.
As I tied my skates, I felt the leather tight against my heel like a comforting caress. My heart began to quicken as I made my way unsteadily towards the wet ice. I felt out of my element, a fish out of water. But once I'd pushed off, I wasn't clumsy anymore. I was free. My skates seemed like they were guiding me wherever they wanted to go.
Oh, excellent, Jessica, very good. Okay, I suppose to sum it all up, the first-person perspective allows us to really be inside the character's mind, whereas the third-person perspective allows us to step outside the character and to see things maybe that they don't see. And that's one of the fun things about writing, is experimenting and seeing how the two different points of view can change a story.
They're right, you know. There's a big difference between doing something and watching it. When you're writing a story, think about whether you want the reader to feel exactly what the character is feeling. In which case, use the first person. I did this. I thought that. Or maybe you want to describe things that the character can't know about. In that case, use the third person. He or she did this. I think I prefer watching to doing, yeah? Much safer.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we've had a little bit of a chat about perspectives now. Perhaps we ought to start thinking about the structure of your story.
What, you mean the beginning, middle and end?
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose let's start with the beginning. I'll tell you what, can you see that young girl out there skating? Now, she is brilliant. Now, what she's done is she's put a really good beginning to her routine. And that's what we need in a short story. We need a great opening line.
How about Tony Jordan was murdered with a pair of ice skates?
That is a good opening line. I mean, if I read that story, I would think, yes, I've got to find out what happened to Tony Jordan. Now I suppose we'll just think about the middle. Now you see how she's kind of twisting and turning on the ice? Well, that's almost what we have to do when we write a short story. We introduce twists and turns to make the reader maybe believe one thing, when in actual fact something else is going on
I was
instead.
thinking of introducing another character to make them all confused.
That's a really good idea. It's kind of like a red herring or something, right? Now, if you watch her now, she's moving on to the big finish, yeah? And that's, again, that's a crucial part of a short story, having a really good finish to it. Because you don't want to disappoint the reader, do you? You don't want to have all these twists and turns and red herrings and they go, oh. So maybe you should think hard about the finish to a story before you even start the beginning. So, have you got any ideas for your big finish?
Got one or two?
I bet you have. I'm really looking forward to this.
The plot and structure of your story, the beginning, middle and end, pretty important things, aren't they? You really need to grab the reader's attention with a blistering beginning. Then you want to have a bit of fun. Make the story twist, turn, and don't be afraid of putting in one or two red herrings to confuse and delude the reader. Then there's the big finish. Get that right, and they'll be thinking about your story long after they've finished reading it. Jessica's having to burn the midnight oil to get her story finished in time for the Young Writer magazine deadline. But sometimes it's worthwhile getting a second opinion.
Hello?
Hello Phil, it's Jess.
Oh, hi Jess, how are you getting on?
Yeah, I think it's going really well at the moment, but I just need your advice.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, there's a few loose ends I'm not sure if I want to tie up. I want to leave things to the reader's imagination.
I mean, that's the ambiguous ending, and that's a really good device for ending a short story. Though I suppose it depends what you got in mind, Jessica.
Sorry Phil, you have to wait till tomorrow. 11 o'clock at the ice rink, okay?
She's not one for giving too much away, is she? Anyway, in just a moment, we'll find out how Jessica's used the ice rink as the setting for her story. Don't forget, anywhere has the potential for horror. Next, Has she chosen to tell her story from the first or the third person perspective, and why? Finally, the structure, the beginning, middle and end. Is it going to grip us from the very start? Will there be any twists, turns and red herrings? And will the big finish return to haunt us?
So, what have you come up with, Jessica?
It's called On Thin Ice. Tony Jordan was murdered with a pair of ice skates. Horribly. The police never found her killer. Tony Jordan, the nation's favourite ice-twirling superstar, destined for Olympic gold. Until he struck. The man in the long dark coat, seen running away into the night. Holly Birchnell shivered as she stood before the trophy dedicated to the memory of Tony Jordan, her eyes drawn to the sparkling silver blades of a pair of Tony's old practice skates. The plaque below read, Tony Jordan, 1972 to 1991. Poor girl, murmured Holly. 19, so much to live for. How could anyone do something so terrible? As Holly began to practice her toe loops and triple jumps, she started to imagine she really was Tony. She almost felt she was Tony. She was lost in her thoughts, when suddenly she heard the words, "He's here." Holly skated round towards the entrance to the ring as a man in a long dark coat walked in. As Holly stared, he pulled out a pair of ice skates from under his coat. Holly knew those skates straight away, bright yellow with black laces. There was something different about them, something wrong. "Dad, you found my favourite skates," she said. And then she realised. "Is that blood?" Holly asked, in a voice she barely recognised as her own. Her dad smiled. "Just some paint, it'll come off." That night, for the first time in her life, Holly knew that she'd be a champion. She saw many things. Medals, trophies, TV interviews, stardom, many, many things. But not the thing that Tony Jordan wanted her to see. 3 words, skated with fluent Olympic precision into the ice. Cut by a true champion. Cut down in her prime. A champion with a new home. Just 3 words. We are one.
Oh, wow, Jessica, that is a really good story, really chilling, really well told. You've done a great job with it. And I mean, I was certain that Holly's dad was the killer.
Never said he wasn't, Phil.
Jessica's story made it into Young Writer magazine. A great way to end this series of Just Right.